Next week, 25 July, will mark the 25th anniversary of the St. James Massacre. So for the Reformation Society and as part of our Henry Morton Stanley School of Christian Journalism, we're wanting to focus on this and see what lessons there are that we can learn from the St. James Massacre just 25 years ago. 25 July marks the anniversary of a dreadful atrocity in Cape Town, a terrorist attack on St. James Church of England in Kenilworth, which left 11 people dead and 50 wounded. At about 7:30 p.m. on Sunday, the 25th of July, 1993, while a congregation of 1,400 listened to a hymn of worship, a group of uplit terrorists burst into the church and opened fire with automatic weapons. Now, you can't trust everything you get in a newspaper. They say AK-47s. Actually, they weren't. You'll hear more about that later. But remember, anything in a newspaper isn't necessarily true. Here's some eyewitness accounts. I noticed the handle of the side door facing the congregation turn, and then the doors were kicked open. A black man wearing some kind of overall was standing in the doorway. He was carrying an assault rifle. As he stepped forward, he raised the rifle, cocked it, and fired it in full automatic directly into the congregation. Another eyewitness described it this way. I saw this man kick open the door next to the stage, and holding his rifle from the hip, he opened up and was spraying bullets across a wide arc into the packed congregation. But before he even opened fire, two other black men who seemed to be wearing some olive green uniforms lobbed 2 hand grenades into the center of the church. There was this trail of smoke from the grenades and a few puffs of smoke from the first shots fired. The grenades were still in the air when he started firing. You can see from this map of the church, the stage area where the pulpit would be, the singers were here. The side door, which is where my father used to go in his wheelchair in the last years of his life, access through this ramp. He used to park on the side. The getaway car was parked on 3rd Avenue, Kenilworth, and they were meaning to come into 2 different sites to catch people in crossfire, but this door remained shut. Our man was sitting about 4 rows in at the back on this side here. Still quoting from eyewitnesses, as I dived under the pew for cover, I heard 2 grenades explode. I looked up and saw pews sticking up into the air. The firing went on for a while, and then suddenly everything was quiet. For many years, Frontline Fellowship has taken the gospel into war zones. On Sunday, the 25th of July 1993, the war zones came to us. Our mission headquarters was just a few meters from St. James on the same road, 3rd Avenue in Kenilworth. Several of our workers were members of St. James, and both my father and my brother were converted at St. James by the ministry of Bishop Frank Retief. I'd just been singing with my daughter Andrea and was about to pray with her before putting her to bed when the phone rang. It was the worst nightmare, Peter. St. James has been attacked by terrorists, we heard. I sped to the church, and my mind just reeled with the implications. I thought of my many friends at St. James, and I prayed that they would be safe. And vivid memories of blood-splattered churches and scenes of massacres in Mozambique and Angola were filling my mind as I drove to St. James. And as if in sympathy with the storm in many hearts, the lightning flashed across the sky and the heavens wept in a blinding downpour of torrential rain. And above the roar of the rain, the air was filled with wailing sirens as convoys of ambulances and police vehicles and fire engines converged upon 3rd Avenue, Kenilworth, creating a monumental traffic jam. Flashing lights, flashing lightning lit up a scene of dazed survivors fleeing from the church, weeping churchgoers, praying in the rain, frantic relatives searching for loved ones. The tiles in the foyer were smeared with blood, and inside the church there were several bodies lying on the blood-stained carpets or on shrapnel-scarred pews, and some wooden pews were overturned. There was a hole in the floor where 1 grenade had exploded. Prayer books, music sheets, welcome cards, Bibles were strewn across the pools of blood. The ceiling was pockmarked with shrapnel. Rescue workers were working swiftly and pretty efficiently. Some of the wounded were being cared for inside the church. Others were being carried out in stretchers to the waiting ambulances. A broken pew was used to transport at least 1 person. There weren't enough stretchers. Pockets of Christians sat or stood holding hands and praying, including this man who just lost his wife minutes before. The police moved swiftly to clear the sanctuary of all but emergency workers. Here you can get a bit of a view from the back of the church at distance. This is about from the stage, the entrance where the entrance was to the right here. And it was that back door that was locked that they also planned to come through. And Charles was sitting 4 pews in on the left side. Then the police began to separate eyewitnesses for questioning, and I located several friends and began to help serve tea to the shock survivors, which is about the only thing I found I could do of any use. There's a lot of people around, and obviously people in a state of shock. Only later, as I began to hear the different testimonies of those involved, did the full scale of the horror actually strike me. It was much worse than it seemed. Mrs. Marita Ackerman was shot in the chest at close range. She died about 30 minutes after arriving in the hospital. Marita had twice triumphed over cancer. She had helped start an outreach ministry to Khayelitsha. She had initiated an outreach to Russian and Ukrainian seamen through the harbour in Cape Town. Marita left behind her husband, 3 children, Bram, Liesel, and Pierre. She was buried on her birthday. 17-year-old Richard O'Kill died instantly from bullet through his head as he flung himself across 2 young friends. He'd actually pulled these friends down, Lisa and Bonnie, to shield them from the line of fire. And then he saw one had stayed up, and he went up, covered her with his body, and pulled her down again and took a bullet in the head while he was rescuing her. 21-year-old Jared Harker died instantly as he dived on top of one of the hand grenades that landed in the aisle, and knowing how many people would be affected by that, he made the instant decision to cover the grenade with his body to protect the lives of the people around him. A police spokesman praised the selfless acts of Jared and said his acts of sacrifice had undoubtedly saved the lives of many others by absorbing most of the blast. In many cemeteries, especially war cemeteries, you'll see John 15:13 listed. Greater love has no one than us, than he laid down his life for his friends. Jared's brother, 13-year-old Wesley, also died in the attack. They left behind their elder brother Sean and parents Dennis and Dawn Harker. 4 of the slain were Russian sailors: Valentine Baraksa, Pavel Beluchev, Audrey Kajul, and Oleg Karamzin. Another victim was Guy Javins. And those are the people who died. Then there's the wounded. 55 people seriously injured, some people crippled for life. One of the victims crippled in the attack, the most heart-rending situation, was that of the Ukrainian sailor Dmitry Makagon. Both his legs were ripped off when one hand grenade fell in his lap. At this point, he was right over where that pool of blood is. His right arm had to be amputated, both his eardrums burst in the blast. Dmitry, who was 23 years old, was earning money as a sailor in order to pay for his wedding upon his return. And his mother was flown out by the church. The St. James Church also flew out his fiancée Olga, and they started a fund for the victims of the massacre. And he got his whole new start in life here in physio. One of the readers of the Tatler magazine literally gave Dmitry a home. A medical student, Gillian Schirmbrucker, narrowly escaped death when a piece of shrapnel pierced her lung and an artery. Her feet were also badly damaged, yet she sang a hymn to comfort her friends as she lay bleeding on the church floor. Several survivors expressed amazement that more people had not been killed, and the police investigators agreed. Nails had been attached to the M26 fragmentary hand grenades to provide additional shrapnel. If Jared had not covered the one grenade with his body, many more would have been killed. If another member of the congregation had not shot back, apparently wounding one of the terrorists, then many more would have been murdered. After the grenades exploded, one of our frontline missionaries, Charles van Wyk, returned fire with a snub-nosed .38 revolver, apparently wounding the terrorist who was firing into the congregation. This is a more recent picture, but just to give you a feel of the distance, that's the door the terrorist came in through. Charles was sitting at the back there, 4 rows in by that door, which was locked on that stormy night, which normally would have been open. Many a time I came late to St. James and I'd slip in through that very door. park my motorbike, and walked through there, taking off my helmet as I came through the door, and it normally was open. And Charles said he was sitting there, hearing rattling at the door, and he was tempted to get up and open. He's wondering, why is the usher not opening the door? Obviously somebody's late. And the man was so distracted by the beautiful singing, he didn't open the door, and praise God they didn't. Crossfire would have been catastrophic. The shooting stopped and the attackers fled. Charles then pursued the terrorist into the parking lot. So he came out this back door and from the corner of the building fired from cover on the terrorists who had the car. He pursued the terrorists in the parking lot, and seeing them standing with weapons at the ready, apparently to shoot down any survivors as they exited the church, Charles again fired at them. The last 3 shots he had in a snub-nosed revolver. At this, they fled in the getaway car and sped off down 3rd Avenue, as described here. Is St. James Church. Our mission headquarters would have been just about there, at 93 3rd Avenue. When the police later recovered the terrorist getaway car, blood stain indicated that at least one of the attackers was wounded. You'll hear more about this later on. And reward was offered, and we'll hear about the investigation later. If you compare the St. James Massacre with similar atrocities in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, and Sudan, it becomes apparent that many more people would have died had Charles not fired back. An official commendation by the Regional Commissioner, Lieutenant General Acker, stated on 25 July 1993, Charles Adrian van Wyk endangered his own life in warding off the attack perpetrated on the St. James congregation in Kenilworth. His action in pursuing the suspects on foot and returning fire prevented further loss of life. One of the suspects wounded in the incident was later arrested. Investigations later indicated that the Upper terrorists had planned also to attack the nearby Christchurch in Kenilworth. The resistance experienced at St. James by Charles shooting back and wounding one of the attackers apparently convinced the Upper terrorists to cancel the attack on Christchurch. If that's so, many more lives were saved. We also heard that they had petrol bombs to throw inside the church and planned to then barricade the doors. That would have greatly increased death toll if so. Here's a letter from Bishop Frank Retief on 18th of August, 3 weeks later. I only learned this week that it was you who reacted on the night of 25 July and drove the terrorists out of the church by returning fire. I'm writing to express my personal gratitude to you for your quick thinking action. The police have indicated to us that had it not been for this, the disaster could have been much greater. Please accept my thanks on behalf of the Church Council of St. James. I understand some criticism has been levelled at you for your actions. In fact, he was attacked by none other than Bishop Desmond Tutu on the front page of the newspaper, the morning paper of the 26th, in other words, attacks late on Sunday night. The next morning paper, front page, has a picture of Desmond Tutu condemning Charles van Wyk. What is a congregant doing with a gun in church? This is not on, he said. You can't have congregants going to church with a gun. I mean, you're making the work environment of the terrorists much harder. We can't have people shooting back. And so he was attacked, and there was a lot of criticism for Charles. And we, in fact, conveyed to Frank Retief, isn't it time to acknowledge what he's done, because he's getting a lot of attacks, and here's a person going through his own trauma, and yet he's been criticized by fellow church members that what he did was wrong. And I thought something from the pulpit should be said. Nevertheless, a private letter was given. I understand some criticism has been levelled at you for your actions. However, I personally have not heard any criticism and suggest you ignore any such comments. Many people have expressed their admiration for the way you reacted in an emergency, and I want you to know that from the point of view of the leadership of our church, we think your actions on that night were justified. Please be encouraged, and may the Lord continue to bless you and help you in your Christian life. Sincerely, Frank Retief. So that's from the Cape Area Bishop's Office. In numerous reports on the St. James Massacre, the questions have been asked, who could possibly want to attack a congregation of Christians worshipping in a church? What could anyone hope to accomplish through such senseless slaughter? To these questions, Christians have added another question. How should we as Christians respond to persecution? When I saw the shocking carnage at St. James Church, it immediately brought back similar bloody scenes flooding back into my mind. Over those 36 years of missionary work, I've personally come across similar atrocities, especially in Angola. For example, at Chalisa Evangelical Church in Angola, Cuban troops shot 150 Christians during a church service, including the pastor Aurelia Sanjay. In Rwanda, more people were murdered in churches and schools and hospitals than everywhere else. I personally waded knee-deep in corpses in a church, 1,200 dead people in Natarama Church alone. In northern Nigeria, just in 1 month, just in a 5-year period, 1,000 churches were attacked in Nigeria, with 17,000 Christians killed between 2010 and 2015. In Sudan, I've had 1,200 preaching opportunities in southern Sudan and Nuba Mountains. I don't think I've ever preached in a school or a church that hasn't been bombed at least once. Sometimes 18 times in a 12-month period. One church I ministered in Kauda in the Nuba Mountains. Another church had been bombed 10 times in a previous year, like the birthplace of Christianity in southern Sudan, Fraser Cathedral in Lui. In Mozambique, in August 1983, Falima troops killed 5 pastors and burnt down 5 churches in Mosquito village in Zambezia province. In September 1983, Falima troops killed over 50 Christians and burnt a church down in Basura village. At Elam Mission Station in Zimbabwe, what was then Rhodesia, 13 missionaries and their children were murdered in June 1978. At New Adams Farm in Zimbabwe in 1987, 16 missionaries and their children were murdered, brutally. These are the most lovely people, and they were pacifists, just like the ones at Elam. Pacifist, Pentecostal missionaries who had no weapons, who had no animosity to anyone. They were just generous, gentle, kind people, targeted by Marxist mass-murdering thugs, destroying their magnificent work, which was bringing joy and love to many people. The memorial service in nearby Bulawayo for the New Adams Farm murders. And so when you consider the attacks that had happened before, like Boko Haram terrorists and Muslim mobs destroying 1,000 churches, killing 17,000 Christians in Nigeria in 5 years, and in Sudan, how many hundreds of churches have been bombed and burned? Hundreds of churches have been attacked in Egypt, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and all churches in Somalia were destroyed in 1993, the same year that St. James was attacked. So if you consider what has happened in other church attacks around the world, especially in Africa, it's extraordinary that more people didn't die at St. James. There were 1,400 people there that night. You could continue to recount literally hundreds of similar atrocities against Christian churches. And yet, you'll have people in some churches saying, no congregant should be allowed to carry a firearm into a church. Well, he's only going to use it if somebody attacks them. Surely what we should be upset about is that terrorists would come into a church to murder people. What's wrong with somebody having a weapon who's a law-abiding citizen who would only use it to defend people in the event of an attack? The fact is, churches have often been the target of Muslim extremists and Marxist terrorists. The aim of persecution is not to kill Christians. Sending believers to meet the Lord in heaven hardly achieves the purposes of evil. No, the aim of persecution is to shock Christians into fear and inactivity, to paralyze and neutralize the church, to shut us up, that we will be quiet. Only if we give in to this fear and allow ourselves to be intimidated into silence and compromise, only then would the enemy achieve his objectives. In this context, it was shameful that some sought to exploit such tragedies to enhance their own public image or to promote interfaith services. Just one, for example, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who made such, he was the first, he got his press statements in so early that the morning newspapers on Monday the 26th had his picture and everything. I heard from all over the world, what's this I hear about a black church being attacked by white terrorists in Cape Town? No, it's actually the other way around. No, but one of Desmond Tutu's church was attacked by white terrorists, and because his picture was out there, and he's known as the Anglican, he hijacked this, that because he was only... Frank Retief was too busy counselling the people who had lost loved ones. He didn't put out a press statement for weeks. And so for the first week, all over the world, when the news was headlines, the impression was a Desmond Tutu church has been attacked because he's for liberation, he's for Mandela, and obviously it's some white right-wing extremists who've done this attack. And he got millions of pounds and D-mark and dollars pouring in because he hijacked the whole thing, and there was a huge amount of misunderstanding. And it got worse. Of course, his first words of condemnation were for Charles van Wyk, our missionary, for having a 38 special in a church. No apparent criticism, and I studied the paper very carefully, for the people carrying assault rifles into the church and grenades. So as I wrote in the following letter to a Cape newspaper, the Cape Times and the Cape Argus, who both printed it, it is hard for us to take politicians or Archbishop Tutu seriously when they so shamelessly milk tragedies like the St. James Massacre for media coverage and to advance their political agenda. I find it offensive that certain priests and politicians have cynically exploited the Sunday Massacre for their own political ends. With the ANC's abysmal human rights record of planting landmines in farm roads, car bombs in public streets, and limpet mines in shopping centres and restaurants, they are the last people who have the right to condemn violence. ANC actually come up, we condemn this violence. Like the Church Street bombing, just for off the top of my head, the thousands of victims of ANC necklace murders, the petrol bomb attacks, the stonings, the shootings, and those dissidents tortured in ANC concentration camps bear eloquent testimony to ANC's real position on violence. As for Desmond Tutu, here he is. See, God's word above all things is the entrance to St. James. How could he barge into St. James and lie to the policeman on duty, claiming that he was the head of the denomination when the priest said he can't come into crime? He said, I'm the Archbishop in charge of the denomination. Well, how are the policeman to know that he wasn't, in order to gain access to the site of the massacre? Most people are not aware that the Church of England in South Africa, Church of England South Africa, CESA, is an entirely separate denomination by law from Tutu's Church of the Province of South Africa. All over the world, Anglican and Church of England is synonymous, but not in South Africa. Legally, there's a split. The Church of England South Africa is evangelical, more conservative. The Church of the Province, the Anglicans, are the liberals, and part of the World Council churches. There's a big, huge gap legally since the days of Bishop Gray and Killenzer, but that's another story. But even though most people aren't aware of this, surely Desmond Tutu is aware he's not the head of the Church of England. In fact, he knows that because Church of England has regularly had lawsuits from the Anglican Church. And Bishop Stephen Bradley, in his book, in his memoirs, documented how Anglican priests murdered Church of England ministers in Zululand. How there was not only hijacking of churches, legal things, theft, there was murders to take over Church of England congregations and put them part Anglicans. And Stephen Bradley was straightforward about the fact of where they stood, and that's why he had on every Church of England bulletin board, notice board, and letterhead, in no way affiliated with the World Council of Churches, which sadly has fallen off lately. Continuing with my letter to the Argus and the Cape Times, for Tutu to have gained access for his media entourage to St. James by deception and then to have desecrated the sanctuary by turning it into a media circus, to exploit this tragedy for his image overseas is despicable. The pictures of him walking around the church, pretending to weep and so on, brought him millions, tens of millions, donations all over because they thought it was his church attacked. I mean, most people don't read the text, they just see the picture. The image was, there's Desmond Tutu. He got all the media coverage, and the media was not interested in what Bishop Frank Retief had to say. Other political activists in the guise of the priesthood have suggested that we use this opportunity for a reconciliation service, which went ahead actually in Cape Town City Hall. St. James is a fully multiracial church that has opened its doors to all races at all times. St. James has an outreach to Khayelitsha. In fact, that very year, one of the missionaries to Khayelitsha got shot dead in the township. And St. James offers Bible studies in Khoza on a weekly basis. We have always worked for reconciliation first to God and then to man. St. James does not have to use this tragic event to prove its commitment to reconciliation. The Church of England, South Africa, is an evangelical denomination which holds the inerrancy of the Bible as God's perfect word. The Church of England holds the full deity of our Lord Jesus Christ and his bodily resurrection from the grave. We proclaim salvation by the grace of God through the atonement of Christ received by faith. For this reason, it would betray the martyrs who were killed on Sunday if we were to participate in an interfaith service with those who reject this gospel. And this is from a newspaper cutting of the interfaith service where they had all kinds of witch doctors and so on, and rabbi and imam and what have you coming along at this thing where they had upper terrorists and so on the stage. And it's a circus. And sadly, some St. James people went there, but none of the leadership that I'm aware of. Conclusion to my letter to the press. The greatest tribute and memorial which we could erect in honor of the victims of this massacre would be for us to remain faithful to Jesus Christ and his word, the Bible. May many more come to Christ in true faith and repentance. So that's the letter, quote unquote. I noticed that every time the negotiation process stalled and reached a deadlock, some high-profile atrocity occurred which was then used to accelerate the process of hurting this country towards the transitional executive control which the socialist liberation forces desired. Their expressions of outrage were hard to take seriously. Their actions, stained with the blood of thousands of innocent victims, spoke far more loudly than their words. Which brings us to the third question. How should we as believers respond to persecution? In any crisis or tragedy, we need to turn to God and cast all of our burdens and all of our frustrations upon him in prayer. We need to seek answers and guidance from studying the Word of God. Many survivors of similar atrocities have found tremendous comfort and strength through praying the Psalms, the biggest book of the Bible, the middle book of the Bible, the prayer book of the Bible. It deals with everything, grief and frustration and anger and guilt and shame and all the different human emotions, everything we can go through. It's all in the Psalms, and we need to pray the Psalms. At the midweek service, 3 days after the massacre, the Wednesday night service, the church was packed almost to capacity. Bishop Frank Retief opened the service by reading Psalm 11. In the Lord I take refuge. How then can you say to me, flee like a bird to your mountain? For look, the wicked bend their bows. They set the arrows against the strings, to shoot from the shadows against the upright in heart. When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord is on his heavenly throne. He observes the sons of men. His eyes examine them. The Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked and those who love violence his soul hates. On the wicked he will rain fiery coals and burning sulfur. A scorching wind will be their lot. By the way, this picture here I took in Lansdowne Road. This is a PAC mob marching to Claremont Police Station to demand the release of Micaiah, who they thought was locked up there. And I saw in the front row Patricia DeLille, or Cruella DeVille, along with all of them chanting, one minister, one bullet, one church, one bomb. Kill the Boer, kill the farmer. One minister, one bullet, one church, one bomb. They were chanting this right outside the police station. I'm still quoting though from Psalm 11. For the Lord is righteous, he loves justice, upright men will see his face. So that was the reading on that first service at St. James after the attack. Frank Retief said that many had commented on the calmness of the St. James congregation in the face of this tragedy. While we are shocked, stunned, shattered, hurt and angry at the senselessness of what has happened, we also have a sense of peace. At the Sunday evening service 1 week after the massacre, over 2,000 packed the church and the overflow facilities. If the aim of the terrorists had been to terrify people into avoiding the church, they had clearly failed. Well, I must say there are some people who were there that night who've never returned to St. James. The trauma was too great. But others came. At that service, Reverend Frank Retief outlined a biblical response to the tragedy, which I summarized as follows. The world is not our home. We are pilgrims passing through. Do make a meaningful contribution to improving society. But don't get too caught up in materialism and personal ambitions. We don't live forever. We must believe in a day of judgment. If evil is not finally punished, then this world is meaningless. The wicked may seem to prosper for a time, but a just God will deal with wickedness. As Christians, we have the spiritual resources to cope with such tragedy. Life is uncertain. None of us knows how long we will live. Spiritual apathy is dangerous. We need to be jolted awake. There is a constant need to re-examine ourselves. Is your faith genuine or nominal? Watch out for temporary emotional motivation. Be done with empty words. Do away with frivolous things. Be serious about your faith. Get involved in the life of your church and get involved in the life of others. Invest in eternity. Do not be ruled by fear. Our trust must be in God. We must fear God and no one else. So that's my notes from Frank Retief's message. As we learn to cope with the shock and the sense of loss, many testimonies of God's grace and sovereignty began to surface. The attack took place on St. James' Day, the day when the church commemorates the first apostle who was martyred, St. James, or the Apostle James. The attack took place 5 minutes after the children had left for a children's service in a separate venue across the road. The attackers apparently wanted to burst through several doors simultaneously, but the other doors were locked on that cold winter night. Excerpts from the unpreached sermon of Reverend Ross Anderson, which he was going to preach that night, were printed in local newspapers, which wouldn't have been done otherwise. One verse stands out in particular from his unpreached sermon. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies." One man testified that as he pushed his wife's head down, he felt a bullet whistle over the back of his hand slam into the wall behind. Another husband pushed his wife flat seconds before a bullet smashed into the backrest against which she had been sitting. One Ukrainian seaman, Dimikiv Vladimir, testified of how Marika Ackerman had led him to Christ. "I've been a seaman for 28 years, and never in this time have I met such warm, kind-hearted people as Marita and Darby Ackerman. I met Marita in October last year, my first time in Cape Town. Marita gave me some papers to read about our Lord. Before that, I was an atheist. Marita invited me and my crew to church, and our attitudes changed as we began to read and discuss the Bible. Just 3 weeks before the massacre, 72 Russian and Ukrainian sailors had made public commitments to Christ at St. James. Marita's favorite verse was Philippians 3 verse 10. I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. Other members of the church shared these testimonies. Possessions and position are no longer important to us. These things last only for a short time. When we keep our mind on God, God keeps our mind at peace. These are all quotes from people who lived through it. God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble. The verse from Psalm 46 that inspired a mighty fortress is our God. On the order of service bulletins handed out the main funeral service on 29th of July, the passage was quoted, "Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble, or hardship, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger, or sword? No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." Frontline Fellowship's official letter of sympathy to St. James Church includes this following message. Jesus Christ is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. You cannot destroy the church by attacking buildings. The church is not buildings, but people. People who love Jesus Christ. People who have a relationship with God as their Father. People who have been changed by the power of the Holy Spirit. You cannot kill Christians by sending them to heaven. Death for the Christian is not final. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. We rejoice in the assurance that the great work which he has begun at St. James will not falter or be distracted from the Great Commission. That was our letter. How are we to respond? This event should encourage us not to betray the faith, for which so many martyrs have died. The only appropriate response to such massacres is for us to be faithful to the Lord Jesus and to his word, the Bible. We dare not allow the fear of man to divert us from fulfilling the great commission of our Lord Jesus Christ. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. We are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, and with all of our strength. And we are to love our neighbor as ourselves, making disciples, teaching obedience to all things that he has commanded. In any crisis or tragedy, we need to turn to God and cast all of our burdens and frustrations upon Him in prayer. We need to seek answers and guidance from studying the Word of God. And so, praying through the Psalms, learning what security measures we can take to strengthen and protect our family and our church. Courage is contagious. When a brave man takes a stand, the spines of others are often stiffened. And so we need to know how to survive and how to protect. Life is a fight. Do not let it overwhelm you. Adapt and combat every situation that's thrown at you. Shot and Beck, the one who shot back at St. James, and other people I trust, helped contribute to the Security and Survival Handbook. This is what the knights used to make pledges of in the Middle Ages. I will defend the weak, I will defend freedom, I will sacrifice that others may live free, I will defend my family to death. I love peace, but I'm a fierce enemy. I live by a special code. I live with honor. I was born to be the warrior. Be without fear in the face of the enemies. Be brave and upright, that God may love thee. Speak the truth always, even if it leads to your death. Safeguard the helpless and do no wrong. That is your oath. They used to swear on their sword, which of course is in the shape of a cross, for the very reason that the purpose of a knight was to protect the defenseless against evil. Such traumatic experiences remind us of the reality of the spiritual war that each of us are engaged in. There is a life and death struggle between the kingdom of God and the force of Satan, and outside of Christ, man is desperately wicked. And we're facing people today who have no problem identifying with the hammer and the sickle, the Southern Communist Party and others. We've got revolutionaries in our streets for whom the people who attacked St. James are heroes, and who seem to be in love with death and evolution. It is appointed unto man once to die, and after that, the judgment. That's an appointment nobody will miss. Some people may escape justice on earth, but nobody will escape justice in eternity. God is just. He will ultimately reward the faithful, and He will punish the wicked. This is the eternal home for the communist and atheist. We need to live our lives for the glory of God to the fullest. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. You only have one life, it'll soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last.
I was going to cover the period before the St. James attack and the political climate prior to the attack. I had a discussion with my old colleague from COVID Intelligence before coming here, and he said you should actually address the period prior to the attack and the climate before that. He wanted me to talk a little bit about the Codesa issue, the talks that was going on at that point, the fact that APLA did not, and the PAC did not commit to the talks at that point. They were not part of the conversation. They didn't want to be part. They were hiding out in Transkei somewhere. So they weren't part. We had the right at that point not really wanting to give way to this conversation. At the Codesa talks, and they were planting bombs. So a very difficult period in the country. And one of the more difficult things that I was involved in is that in that period the security branch knew that the Nelson Mandela release was going to come very, very soon, and so we had to change our colors. And yeah, I've been with the security branch for many years prior to the attack, and we had to change our colors from a political police that enforced the government's policies against communism and the ANC and all the banned organizations, to a more acceptable intelligence collating information of crime, which, we would serve as investigative capacities and help them to find the criminals, but moving gradually away from the political sphere. That's what our political masters at that point wanted. To add to that, they've asked me to assist them in destroying all our information, because integration was going to come. Many of the ANC people were our sources. They were integrated. They were many of them, many of the senior people were sources of the security branch. They gave us information. And to some extent we had to protect them, because if they are going to come into and be part of the government now, we could not allow their own people to find out that they worked hand in hand and hand in glove with the security branch. So all of that had to be destroyed, everything. So over a period of weeks, we drove truckloads full of files. I mean, it was painful to see, because we had blanket coverage in this country. Really, we were compared with the best intelligence agencies in the world. Really, you would not stand up at a meeting like this and talk against the government without us knowing tomorrow about it. And if you do it a second time, there will most certainly be a pencil index against your name. And if you do it the third time, we will start looking more stringently at you. We will look at your mail, we will look at your phone calls, and we will start looking at you. Why are you talking? What's your connections? Do you have communist connections? Do you have, we protected the government, and we protected our democracy. I believed in it firmly. Nothing wrong with that. So we started destroying all this information, all of it. We had info of people leaving the country. We had information on people coming in, people that were trained. We had fingerprints. We had pictures. With everything. All of it had to be destroyed. So we drove over this period of 6 weeks out to the industrial area, chasing those ovens up to 1,000 degrees and chucking files one by one into the furnaces. They would explode before reaching the liquid metal there at the bottom. They would, you'd open, you feel that heat, and you just start chucking these files, and everything just burning away. All those years, all the sources, all the information. And then it happened. What we were scared of. So I believe in most book clubs they have something they call a reading. So tonight I'm going to do a little bit of a reading, because I can't remember everything I said. But I just want to give you a different insight to it, and then we'll discuss. So let me just read a little bit to you, and hopefully I can see everything I wrote here and any mistakes in writing it. So it was raining heavily on Sunday the 25th of July 1993 in Cape Town. An old Muslim grandfather and his grandson were making their way to a small cafe in one of the side streets in the suburb of Kenilworth. He was holding his grandson by the hand. A few street blocks away were the St. James Church in 3rd Avenue. It was about 1940. There was a break in the constant downpour, and he needed to buy some bread for his wife. Close to the cafe, a greenish Datsun 230, C230 passed them slowly. The car was old and beaten up, but the engine still sounded good. The old man saw them as they slowly drove past. He stopped and looked at the car. The lights illuminating the number plate at the back were not working. There was no number plate in the car anyway. He could see that. There were 4 men in the car. He looked carefully. He had an ominous feeling about this car driving slowly past them. He said to his grandson, "These people are up to no good." After buying his bread and leaving the cafe, the old man heard some shots and 2 loud bangs. The old man quickened his pace. He wanted to get his grandson off the street. These were uncertain times. He felt that the car he saw had something to do with whatever was happening. This suburb is usually quiet. He could not escape the feeling that something really bad was happening. Now, Peter's elaborated about the St. James Church and how and where they were involved in, and the kind of church they were. I remember receiving the call shortly after 8 o'clock that evening. And coming from the Bloberg area, I covered the distance in a record time, and I remember driving into 3rd Avenue, and you never really become used to it. The glow of the red lights of the ambulances and the blue lights of the police already at the scene. Claremont Police Station is just Kenilworth Police Station, just around the corner from it. It's actually very close to the church, just around the corner. So they were there first at the scene, and obviously then the investigative capacities and the specialized units started arriving. I remember finding Leonard Knipe there and immediately, offered our help from the security branch side. I had the consent of Willem Smith, who at that point was the commander of the oil security branch. We had capacities that neither of the units in the police had. We had things that they did not know existed. So in this investigation, we offered them everything that we had. I remember Leonard Knipe was taken aback because all of a sudden there were computers out and there were typists, and we set up a whole, almost a control point at church. We did not operate from the station, but at church we started working from church. The church was amazing. The people were amazing. I remember over the weeks that we investigated from there, every time we came in there were sandwiches and there were hot coffee. And I remember the first period that we investigated, the first 72 hours driving home, after 72 hours after leaving my wife, I remember how she was shocked, and in the rain I remember running out to the car trying to light a cigarette, but it was just raining too hectically, and so I remember driving, and after 72 hours I went home, and I said to Rizan, my wife, I said, please can you arrange that you go to your parents, because I will disrupt this whole household. Stalk was still young, and I needed to be alone. I needed to be on my own and not have any responsibilities in going home or anything. She needed to go to her parents, and we arranged that, and then I was free. Leonard Knipe was going through his first divorce, and so he had time on his hands, and we spent all the time we had on the investigation. We ran 24/7 constantly. The hours ticked by and the days ticked by, and we did not find the car that we were looking for. Initially, the car that we were looking for, according to witnesses at the church, was a Mercedes-Benz, a green Mercedes-Benz, W124 series. Also had these long lights at the back. And we were looking for that car. We could not find that car. And 3 days down the line, we didn't find the car. And there was APB out on this car, no registration number, but we were looking for the car. We couldn't find the car. And then one day, this old Muslim man comes walking into the control point with his grandson by his hand. And I met him halfway across the hallway there, and I asked, can I help you? I asked him. And he said, you're looking for the wrong car. And I took his statement, and I spoke to Desmond Siegel from Murder and Robbery, and I said, you're looking for the wrong car. And we threw out the APB, and it was literally an hour and a half we found the car. And that's the car we saw Michael Barke, since, that was Michael standing there showing the hole in the car. That's Michael. So he's from Murder and Robbery, and he was part of the investigation team. So we found the car, and the first thing we saw, Leonard flew in with a helicopter, and it was Snakes Jason and myself, and Des that drove out to the car. And when Leonard landed with the helicopter, I came to the car, and the left back of that car that you saw there was a line of blood in the right window, just sort of a smear blood, not a lot of blood, just a line of blood that we found inside. So we had blood, and we took the sample. Now we had DNA, but we had, it was early days with the DNA. But we had no suspect to compare it against. We just had DNA. That's all we had. We had no information now. All our files are destroyed from the security branch side. This was definitely a political attack. We had nothing to go back on. So as we sit around conference tables and thinking and talking and brainstorming as to who could possibly have done this, we had to thumbsuck and use our heads from what we could remember and thinking about possibilities. And it was a difficult time. Look, the pressure was on to try and find these people, and as days go by and there's no success, the frustration just piles up and gets more and more and more. And then one day Leonard came and said, we cannot put the church through this anymore. It was just after the the funerals we had there. And the funeral was a difficult period for us. And I remember, all of us keeping, and I said to Peter the other day, what's difficult about this was trying to not make this personal. Most scenes when you go to, whether it's a murder scene, or you try not to make it personal, you try to focus on facts. But this, I remember driving home and this stone in my stomach just growing more and more, and it was hate. I hated these people. I could not understand how you could do this to bring any point across. It made no sense. Why the church? Why these people? So suppressing that emotion to a large extent, it wasn't really possible in the St. James scenario. It became very, very difficult for us to do that. And I remember during the funeral, I was standing, and Neville de Beer was standing in front of me, and O'Keel's father was talking, and and his father was giving a eulogy about his son, and he was talking about how his son used to sing in the shower, and how he would never hear him sing again in the shower. I remember that was stuck in the back of my mind. I remember talking about his son. He was talking very personal about his son, and loving about his son, and how he forgives the people that attacked his son and killed his son in church. He forgave them. And I looked down at Neville de Beer, and when he said, "I forgive these people," and Neville de Beer turning around, and Neville exclaimed in a way that policeman understands that, and I understand it at the time, and he just said the F word, and he said, I can't take this. And he turned around, and I could see the emotion in his face, and he walked out. Now, these are hardened cops. And he went to the cars, and he lit a cigarette, and he stood there staring out down the street. And so I knew that the whole investigation team standing there were so geared to find these people. There was nothing that's going to stop them. But we had no information, nothing. And I remember that Frank Retief and them, they were praying for a breakthrough. And ultimately, we sat with Frank, but everything that could have been done had been done at church now. And then it came to me and said, pack it up, we're going to murder and robbery officers. And we moved to the Akker building out in Belvoir South, and the investigation started from there. And we hit left and we hit right, but it was like a blind man hitting in the dark. Nothing. We followed up all the information that came through on people with guns in certain areas, and beans and guns, everything. But then one day, a young man called Casper Rousseau, I used to work with Casper way back. He was still a constable then, but now he was a sergeant, and they were working on a unit in Guguletu, from the Guguletu police station. They were operating from there. And they were a unit that go out to find suspects, not only in the Guguletu area, but when you have a Guguletu of a suspect that you suspect hide out in Guguletu, you would go to Casper and them, and they've got a team that runs and try to find and have their own sources. So Casper and them were about to go off duty. They were about to go home. And one of the guys said to Casper, let's just take one more trip through Guguletu, because they were looking for a young man who was involved with the self-defense units at the time, and he was shooting at policemen, and they were looking for him. So they're driving in a little minibus vehicle. Casper did not have his second chance or his bulletproof jacket on. The rest of them all wore bulletproof jackets, and they were totally oblivious with, obviously they knew about the investigation, but they were not part of our investigation. They were a different unit, and And as they were driving in Guguletu down one of the side streets, Casper saw a young man walking with a sling bag, black sling bag over his shoulder. And somehow he attracted the attention of Casper Rousseau. And Casper said to the driver, stop. And the driver stopped, and Casper shouted at the young man, "Wait up!" and the young man started running. Casper chased him, but in this whole chase, he threw the black bag away, the young man. Casper found him and brought him back to the black bag. And inside the black bag, what we found was 2 remote controls, which didn't mean anything really. We found bullets, which were straight special rounds, which didn't really mean anything either. But then we found nails. And it was similar to the nails used that was taped to the M26s. And then on top of that, right at the bottom, we found the complete escape plan from the St. James Church. The whole escape plan, which roads they would take, whether this young man was on his way to meet up with the rest of the clan or the rest of the crew, we would not know at that point. We did not. And then Ginakaya Makoma was arrested. And as we arrested him, on his left hand, on his little finger, there was a cut. On the first digit there was a cut. And that was, as they were closing the door, the DNA that we had matched his DNA. So we put him in the car, he was there. So we got him. He was 15 at the time. Now we had to question Ginakaya because now we had to prepare a case against him. And the best way to do this was to get him to make a full statement and to come clean. And he was not having any of that. I remember Ginakaya was extremely scared of me. I don't know why, but he was extremely scared of me. He would creep into the one corner if I would come into the office, and he would point at me and he would say to me, "I have Vusi's eyes." Now, we later found out that Vusi was one of their commanders in this whole initiative. It had me worried for a while, would I look like somebody that would shoot people in church? But for some reason, Ginakaya was very scared of me. But he did not make any statement at all. Nothing. And the interrogation was a hectic interrogation period that he had to go through. We interrogated him quite heavily. He did not break at all. And then we had another plan. Another plan was hatched. And it was a plan that did not involve any violence against him. We just had to sit back, reassess, and make a proper plan. It did involve the security branch, but not in the way that most people will think. But it does involve speaking to Ginakaya in his own language. But not a township kind of language. It was homeland Xhosa. It was a different level Xhosa. It was a higher Xhosa. It was not home, it was homeland Xhosa. And one of our colleagues could do that. And Ginakaya admitted to him everything. And so we had him admitting to the crime that was committed, but still he did not give up the other names. Not at all. At that point of that investigation, I was pulled away and had to go to the Goldstone Commission, and the investigation continued. Later, the other 3 were arrested. They were already taken up in the army. They were officers in the army already. So all 3 of them were arrested. And with that, the St. James Church attack investigation came to a successful conclusion, only to see them all walk free after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission made a decision that this was a political attack on the church, and which, still stuck in my throat like a fishbone. I can't understand this. What's even more disconcerting was the fact that when Ginakaya Makoma left jail, one of them were killed. One of them were killed in a car accident in that period where they were applying for amnesty. And then 3 of them walked away. What was difficult for me was to see that what was his name? Mahoba. he was he's a bishop now, I think he is. Or he's appointed a bishop now. He was the leader of the PAC at that point. He welcomed Ganakaya back into the community with open arms. And to me that was also the strangest thing. How can he was a reverend and appointed a bishop? How these are Christian titles. How do you with open arms invite somebody like that back into the community? But then Ganakaya, let me just read this to you. It is mind-boggling how someone carrying the title of reverend and now bishop could even remotely condone acts of violence in any of its ugly forms, for whatever reason. How could they carry these titles, which at its core were of a Christian church that represented the Christian faith, unconditional love with forgiveness, and also follow the communist teachings of a Marx and a Lenin? In my personal opinion, it's totally ridiculous. They stand in total contradiction to each other. Be one or the other. Decide which coat you want to wear, but you cannot hang on the cross and bang in the nails. What was even more disconcerting is that after I left the South African police for the private sector, Ganakaya Makoma again was arrested. This was after his amnesty, was arrested again. He continued his career in crime. He was sentenced to life plus 46 years. He was now 36 years old. He led 8 others in a cash-in-transit heist in Duiker Street, in Cape Town suburb of Parow. It was a lethal shootout, in where, again, innocent people were shot and killed. The sentences were to run concurrently. The hero that was welcomed back by the PAC's Reverend Magoba was in jail again, for life hopefully. He was charged with murder, attempted murder, possession of illegal guns, machine guns, and robbery with aggravated circumstances. The investigation officer, in this case Andrew van der Walt, worked with me in the past, and he was a good investigator. In defense, Ganakaya claimed that the attack on the St. James Church had dogged his life, and that it had caused him to kill again. It is one of the most ridiculous and preposterous and laughable defenses Judge Patrick Gamble probably have ever heard. It was not even considered during the sentencing. It was criminal mindedness and greed that drove him to ultimately plan and commit this crime, according to the learned judge. The defense of Ganakaya Makoma claimed that his role in the attack on the St. James Church should not be taken into consideration, and that the record was expunged by the TRC. The judge claimed, although expunged, his role in the attack was historically true and a fact. The judge wanted to read the TRC ruling, but for some reason it was never put before the court by the defense. One must question the decision by the defense not to put the TRC ruling in front of the court. Ganakaya finally got the sentence he should have gotten, but only after more people died at his hand. So he's still in jail. I do not know where his comrades are. They are probably in the defense force. To this day, it stands out as one of the most callous deeds by criminals committed, and it's right up there. From this scene onwards, things went backwards in a very ugly way for me in my career, and I remember spending many nights, and Rizan can be a witness to that, to bombings, to killings. It really started at the St. James Church attack, and maybe that was the sort of a watershed for me in my police career. And I stand here today before you, and I'm proud to say that I've shared emotions and I've shared these memories with top investigators and brilliant policemen. it's unfortunate that we have become what we've become now. It is, it's sad. So I hope that a little bit through this process and through the book that we are busy with, Peter and I, that I can explain some of the emotions and the periods that we've gone through, what we feel like and what we felt as investigators. It's a, to me, it's a journey. It's a process where I feel like I'm looking back on my life, and I can see God's hand in guiding, even in the periods where I felt He was very far away from me, that He was actually far closer than you can perceive. And so as you walk, and I explained to Peter, I feel like as we walk up this hill of life and we encounter issues and troubles and pains and aches, and you don't look back. You just keep looking in front of you, and you just keep on slogging. But at some point, when you actually turn around, you look at the view, you can see where you walked and how you were carried, and how. And I'm standing here today, and I'm looking at my family, and I'm at my kids, and yeah, it's emotional. It's emotional to me. It was a journey, and it was quite a journey. So I hope that this book would probably touch people and make them understand what we feel and what we felt. And even with my old colleagues, the book is not about me. It's not about, but it's about second chances, because through this whole process, I nearly also lost my life, and a couple of times. But I share that podium with many of my colleagues. In this investigation, in this road, I've lost many, even with the St. James Church attack. 4 of them are dead. They've died. 3 of them. 4 of them. And I remember speaking to Frank Retief shortly after I left the police. And for some reason, I wanted to go back to the church. Not that the church stood out as this benchmark investigation. There was just so many of them. But I remember I wanted to go back to the church. And I tried to make it out as I wanted to see whether they actually replaced those chairs, because I knew where the holes were. I wanted to know, did they just plastic wood it? Were they, what did they do? They did plastic wood it. They just covered it. They didn't put in new. And I remember there's one place where I walked in and the bullet went through the backrest of one of the chairs, through a Bible and into the person sitting at the back. You must understand, they walked in with our 5 rifles. And our 5 rifle fires a .556 caliber round. It's a NATO round, and it travels between 2,800 and 3,200 feet per second. It's extremely fast. It's a 223 basically, but in military terms we talk .556. Indiscriminately at this distance, the first hit was there at the door. You can imagine the power being hit by a round like that. It's not fun, and I speak of experience. I was hit with them too, so I know what it feels like to be hit by a .556. It's not fun. And those people died. I mean, this woman with her feet shot off, singing still praises to God in the church. It just hits you here. I mean, how do you balance this? How the things with investigations, you get into this. You really get into the life of these people. You take these statements, you understand what they do, you understand their lives, you understand the family, you meet the family, and I tried to make this often. I spoke to one of my colleagues before coming here, and I said, one of them made the remark. I said, well, you've carried it fine. You're fine. It doesn't bother you. Some people can actually handle these things. I don't think that people are made to see these things. I don't think people are made to. I may look outwardly as if I carry it fine, but according to my wife, I don't sleep at night properly. I shake and I rattle like an old car at night. I don't know. Could this be subconscious, these things? Some of my old investigative friends the other day said to me, Skalk, do you dream? I said, no, I don't. I said, do you? He said, yeah. I said, what do you dream about? He said, ugly things. Ugly things. So, you know, all I can do is, so the healing's there. I'm fine, and I've been through worse, but somehow there's something deep inside, rooted deep inside, that doesn't give me a peaceful sleep at night. So maybe that's something that I got to work out at some point, and something that maybe you guys can pray about for me. So, but this is what we deal with out there. And the St. James Church attack, to me, was one of the investigations that stood out. And after that, things just went horribly wrong. And I hope and I pray that as we travel down this road in our country, that I hear we talk about revival, but somehow I feel as if things are going to get worse. We need to know that. We need to be ready for that. And we need to prepare ourselves for that. And, you know, we should take God with us on this journey. Don't leave your gun at home. Take it with you, but take God with you too. I mean, it's, you know, we're not killers. We're not people that go into churches and kill indiscriminately. But we have a right to protect us, and we have a right to protect others' lives. It's a biblical order, I think, Peter. So thank you for your time, and I hope that when the book comes out, you guys will get it and read it, and hopefully it has some effect and tells a story that you could enjoy. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Any questions for Skalk?
Yes,
I'd
ma'am.
like to ask, the attempted assassination on you and the turn off to Pine Mills. Do you remember that years ago? Was that?
It was not a turn off to Pinelands. It was on the M5 Black River Parkway, ma'am. Yeah.
Is that one of your near shaves, one of the worst? How did that affect
It was one of them. There was bombings, and there was accidents, and there were so many of them. There were 12 of them. I nearly died 12 times. 12 times. That was one of them. The shooting was one of them. Yeah.
How did you escape it? Was it just bad aiming or?
Oh no. Bad aiming. I still do not know. I don't know. If you have to read what and his report will be in the book as well. The guy who did what we call the trajectories of the bullets and the lines the bullets followed through the car. What they normally do in investigation. You must understand they fired more than 54 shots on the car.
Yeah.
And 27 hit the car. But it's the spent cartridges in the combi that they stole the night before the assassination attempt, and the cartridges on the scene, all put together, was 54. 27 holes in the car, and I took 5 of them. But I don't know how they missed me, because according to the ballistics expert, they said that even if I laid down on the seat, according to the lines of the bullets, at least 3 of them would have been fatal. It should have been fatal. There was no way I was going to get out of that car, no way. Yet I got out.
So it was a little really.
It was a lot.
God's still got work for you to do. Yes.
Yeah. Don't make me emotional. It was a close shave. Yeah, it was a close shave, and that will be covered as well in the book. In detail, so we will get there at some point. But
The surgeon said he couldn't place a scalpel through you without hitting where the bullets went, without hitting all these key nerves, which basically you either shouldn't have survived or you'd be paralyzed for life. According
He-
to the doctor, he said how a bullet got through all there without hitting all these key vitals was, he said, impossible. And we got the surgeon's statement.
Yeah, the surgeon, I know the surgeon quite well, and I saw him the other day again, and he was just coming out of theatre, and he still had all his stuff on. He was so glad to see me, and he sat down with me, and he took my hands, and he said, "Not a day goes past that I don't think of you." And I said to him, "Let me just talk you through what happened that day with the procedures, and then maybe I can make notes, and I can write down, and I can try and explain in medical terms what happened." And I tried that, and I sent it through to him. He looked at it and says, "No, this is all wrong. Let me write it." Now, I know what a doctor's writing is like. You can't read it. It's like hieroglyphics. He wrote a 7-page report on my injuries. 7 pages. And he said to me, if 0 is well and healthy and 10 is dead, he says, you were 9.5. It was literally so bad, because the one bullet still sits in my neck. It sits between C1 and C2 on the spinal cord, on the base of my brain. They couldn't take it. It's still there. They can't take it. And the one thing we've discovered now through ballistics and through X-rays is that they said that that's not a 9mm. I initially thought this was 9mm. It wasn't. It was a 5.56. And the bullet that caught my leg was also 5.56. And that was what Peter's referring to, the plastic shirt, and says, I cannot take a scalpel and push it past your main nerve, your main artery, and the bone. Yet the bullet went through there, and I don't know how. So
What happens when you go through a metal detector?
everybody asks that. I don't know. No, it doesn't really affect. But then again, having said that, I once walked with a 9mm on my hip into those metal detectors and didn't pick that up. So it's just there for the show. You never know. They can set these things, to certain pick up certain finite detail or just in general. And I think the setting that they do on these things are very low, picking up belt buckles and things like that. It's not really. You've got to really have a big thing in your neck, like my wife. I think she's got a whole. Yeah, she's got screws and titanium plates and things in her neck. So there's so many of us, that were hurt in life, and this is one of the messages as well. We go through life, and if you go through life without marks, you haven't been in a battle. I mean, our Lord Jesus Christ came, and I think the only man-made thing in heaven, they say, is the marks on his hands and on his feet. But he left this earth with marks. Well, are we not to leave this earth without marks? We need to, whether it's a knock that we take psychologically, or whether it's pain that we feel to the loss of something, or whether it's physical, or we have marks, and we carry them. And I carry mine with pride, and because it shaped me. It shapes you, all of you. It makes us who we are, individuals. And and there's many of them, and that's probably why I agreed to do this book. There's many of my colleagues that carries these marks and handle them, unfortunately, in a way that it shouldn't be handled. They drink too much, and they have unhappy lives, and they, and hopefully somehow, and there's still a lot of work to do on this book, and I hope and I pray for guidance every day, and I know that my friend Peter here prayed for that as well the other day. He prayed and said, God, help us to write the best possible book, and I hope that I don't offend through this, but I hope that I heal through this rather than offend, because there will be critique, I know there will be, but we've got to be honest with each other. Thank you, Peter. Is there anyone else? Anything else? Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
How did that guy catch a 15-year-old boy in the townships on foot?
He didn't have his second chance at this time.
Do you know exactly? That was the one reason. He didn't have his second chance jacket. Bulletproof is very heavy. You must understand, we were very fit policemen. We were very fit. I mean, I can take you on a 100 meters still. I'm much older than you are. I know I can. So listen to me. so yeah, he chased him, and if you know Casper Rousseau, then you would understand. These guys come from what we call the old riot squad, and they were top athletes. We believe, and some of my colleagues said to me frequently over, the social media, we were the best. And I would like to believe we were. We're not bad. So he was fast. He caught him because, as Clark said, he didn't wear his bulletproof jacket. The others all had bulletproof jackets on. And that weighs you down. But the guy was young and he moved. And Casper was also young. Casper was in his 20s, 21, 22. So he was a young, fit policeman. And in those years, you wouldn't see a fat policeman. They're omnipresent today, but those years, no. Yeah, but he caught him. And you see the townships, that was our home. We operated in the townships. In the mornings, sometimes I would sit outside Kaya Bazaar in Kailicha and eat a hamburger on my car's boot. It was, and there was respect. We weren't crooks. There was respect for us. We served, there's lots of stories out there. But we served everybody. I did, my unit did, everybody equally. And honestly, don't let people tell you otherwise. There's a lot of nonsense out there. I grew up in a police area where I served black, white, pink equally. I had a colored mother in Penil, in the Groot-Drakenstein area. I ate Sunday lunches with her on the table with her husband there, in my full uniform with my radio. I got invited for Sunday lunches with them in their house. Wonderful Christian family. And all they wanted was to live in peace with no criminality, and they supported us wholeheartedly. And we served them all equally. That's what I want. That's what Peter wants. That's what everybody here wants. There's no hate. Look at St. James Church. It was black, white, pink, Russian, Chinese, whatever you could get. And still they attacked. So, so maybe I'm taking this a little bit too wide, but this is the reality of it. Respect was a very important thing in those years. They respected us.
I just have a question about the 15-year-old. Would you say that it was unusual or fairly common that a man of that age was recruited? I mean, that seems very young to us now.
Well,
maybe not in those days.
No, well, not in those days, not today, because that's when you're the most susceptible to outside influences.
So would you say that a lot of them that are causing all the nonsense and the rioting and the burning and the looting, would you say that a lot of them are that age?
They are. Because then the influence, and now, when you kill the truth, let me put it this way. Rat poison is wonderful food for rats. It's a wonderful meal for them. They love it. There's only a little poison in there. Just a little. I once tried to kill a mouse. I struggled until the rat took the whole thing with all the pellets away to its nest. And they ate it all. The family ate it. I found them later. I found them all dead. But there's just that little poison in there. And you eat that. And you know what? If you take that a 15-year-old and you start feeding him and you only tilt the truth a little bit, that's the most dangerous thing that they do. They start smothering the reality. They start smothering the truth. And they start feeding the lie. A little bit. And the minute you start doubting, they feed you more and they feed you more. And you become so toxic and so hateful that you would go into a church and kill indiscriminately. And that's the sad part of it. What does that little boy know of politics and politicians? And what does he know about that? But it's a communist agenda. They were pushing and feeding him this nonsense. And where did he end up? Now he's got 46 years plus. He's going to die in jail one day. And where are these political masters now? They're gone. He's in jail for the rest of his life.
The people who gave him the instructions on Parliament.
Yeah. So.
One should also note that most of the massacres in Rwanda were done by 12 to 15-year-olds. The Interahamwe is made up entirely of teenagers or even preteens. Other questions?
So, what is your take on the farm murders?
What do you want me to say about that? I've got no idea. What? It's despicable what they do.
No, but it's
But
a
you know-
low intensity war. What's the whole
It's
word?
fun you using that terminology. It's the second time somebody used that. They might use that when you wrote a letter to General West. And you the Taggart thing, he wrote exactly what you just said. This is not the investigation of crime, it's a low intensity war. I cannot say it is because I do not have enough data on it. I do not know how many attacks there have been. I don't know, and I haven't spoken to anybody who's really, and I haven't really looked into it. But it does look orchestrated. If you have to believe the pictures that you see, and you must understand, and you would know, I think you were a policeman yourself, investigators are guided by facts. I can only look at facts and then present what the facts tell me. You cannot surmise. And from social media, you cannot deduct anything.
No, but I'm saying from your experience as a security policeman, so you know.
In my days, there was no such a thing as farm attacks. Nothing. Nothing. I left the police in 1999, well, 2000. There was no such a thing
We
as a
still
farm
had the
attack.
commandos.
Sorry?
We still had the commando system.
Yeah, still the commando system is still in place. What I can tell you is I do see jammers. If I have to see the pictures, I do see jammers, and there are military jammers. Are the army involved? I don't know. Is it MK people that's now got access to army equipment and being sent out to start trouble and getting farmers off the land? I don't know. Surely, if this was the case and investigations are done properly and people are interrogated properly, in our days they would admit, look, we were tasked by this one or that one or this one. But none of these things come out. And I don't know, and so unless I'm directly involved in these investigations, I cannot give you an honest answer. I cannot, I just don't have the data.
I saw a TRC clip today where one of the guys who attacked the church said that they didn't know it was going to be a church. Do you think that's true? Because that
No,
sounds
it's not true.
silly.
No, it's not
But I think it was a bowling alley.
I know, that's what it was.
true. No, everybody knew about the St. James Church. So, that's
They would have heard the singing, seen
Yeah.
the signs. I mean, I've walked down it pathway many times. Huge billboard. You know what it is. There's
You
no
know-
question.
I know you want to go on.
No,
yeah.
not at all.
What was interesting is that sometimes Frank Retief in his church would have a bit of a show to drive a point across. So, a bit of a show or whatever. And this particular day, when these guys come walking into to church, one woman in the front row thought this was a
Church youth sketch.
a sketch.
There was a few people who said that.
They thought it was a sketch, and then this guy swing this gun around and start firing. Now you must understand, when you fire a gun in an enclosure like this, the sound is deafening. It just reverberates from the walls. I mean, and hats off. The hole in the car could only come from Shaw, from his gun. I cannot say for fact whether he actually hit the Nakai Makoma, or whether Makoma was hit by a slide, or in his haste to get out, or hit in the car. I don't know. I do not know. If I don't believe that was a gunshot that caused the bullet, but the fact that they ran and the shots could probably have made them run, and he could have injured himself in his haste to get out of the church because Shaw was firing his gun. That's all probabilities, and the fact that they did drive away was surely because of Shaw's intervention. I'm sure of that. But whether he was hit by a gun, I doubt that very, very seriously. I don't think so, because he didn't even. He looked at his finger, and when a bullet hits your finger, there's sinew sticking out because it just cuts it and just falls. So it's highly unlikely. But that 3H special would have made a much different sound than the rest of the guns, because that's quite a big bullet as well. So they probably thought, "What the heck? I mean, there's somebody firing back. Let's get out of here." And I think Shaw played a huge role, even though there were 53 or 58 people, I think, injured and 11 dead, and it was a terrible scene, horrible.
Sorry, and how did the attackers, how were they using 5.56 ammunition? Where did they get, that was our service
Correct.
for the R5,
Correct.
so where they did, was it R5 assault rifles they were using?
R5.
Where did they establish that from? Where did they get those from? How could it be?
Okay, now here's the thing. When we caught them, they were already in the army. They were officers in the army already. Do you for 1 minute think that they didn't have access to that?
In 93 already.
The guns that shot me was stolen in Claremont police station. And it was 2 R5s and 3 9mm.